My brother tried to evict 30 families from our grandmother's building. He didn't know I was the legal owner. My name is Naomi Langford. I am 31 years old. I manage a 42-unit apartment building in Brooklyn, New York, a building my grandmother built from nothing in 1974. She poured her savings, her sweat, and 50 years of her life into that building. It was her legacy. It was supposed to be her gift. 3 weeks ago, my brother Marcus walked through that building with a stack of letters and a smile on his face. Each letter said the same thing. Rent was going from $23.50 a month to $8,100. Effective in 60 days. No discussion, no warning, no mercy. 30 families, elderly tenants on fixed incomes, single mothers working double shifts. A 72-year-old woman named Rosa Delgado, who has lived there since before I was born. When I asked Marcus how he could do this, he looked at me the way he has always looked at me, like I was something small, standing in the doorway of something important, and said, "Low rent was a favor, Naomi, and favors don't last forever." My father, sitting right there, nodded and added, "Let your brother handle it the way successful people do." But here is what none of them knew. Marcus didn't own that building. He never did. I do. I have been the sole legal owner for 5 years, and I had 3 years of evidence, showing exactly where the money had been going. Every forged signature, every wire transfer, every backroom deal with a developer named Apex. All of it. Before I tell you what happened next, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story resonates with you. Drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from and what time it is there. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. I was 9 years old the first time my grandmother put a rent ledger in my hands. Every Saturday morning, Grandma Ruth would take me on her rounds. We would start on the 6th floor and work our way down, knocking on doors, collecting rent checks, writing receipts by hand in a little leather notebook. She knew every tenant's name, their children's names, their birthdays, their allergies. Mr. Okafor in 6A had a bad knee and needed his radiator bled every October. Mrs. Pak in 3C made the best kimchi on the block and always sent us home with a jar. Darnell Williams in 5B was 7 years old, same as me, and his mom worked nights at Kings County Hospital, so Ruth made sure he had somewhere to go after school. My grandmother didn't just collect rent, she collected people, and she taught me to do the same. Marcus never came with us. Not once. He stayed home playing video games or hanging out with his friends on Nostrand Avenue. My mother always had an excuse ready. Marcus is studying for his SAT prep. He is going to be somebody. She said it like it was obvious. Like the division between us had been settled long before I was old enough to question it. I was 9. I didn't realize then that somebody meant not me. Ruth gave me a small leather notebook that year. "Write everything down," she said. "Names, dates, apartment numbers. This building runs on trust, and trust runs on memory." I still have that notebook. It is sitting on my kitchen counter right now, filled with 22 years of names. By the time I was 12, I could fix a leaky faucet, reset a circuit breaker, and negotiate a payment plan with a tenant who had lost their job. Marcus, at 17, was being praised at the dinner table for getting an A- in economics. My father beamed like the sun had risen just for him. I said I had just renewed 3 leases on my own. My mother said, "That is nice, honey. Pass the potatoes." At 17, I graduated high school with a full scholarship to a paralegal program. $18,000 a year. I had applied in secret, written the essays at the building's front desk between repair calls, and when the acceptance letter came, I set it on the kitchen table and waited for dinner. Dinner never happened. That same afternoon, Marcus, who was 22 and interning at a real estate firm downtown, had apparently helped close some minor deal. My father canceled my celebration dinner and took Marcus to a steakhouse in Manhattan instead. "Your brother's closing deals at 22, Dad said, buttoning his coat. "That is the Langford way." I smiled. I said congratulations. I went to my room, read the scholarship letter one more time alone, folded it back into the envelope, and put it in my desk drawer. It is still there. I checked last week. At 26, my world cracked open. Grandma Ruth passed away on a Tuesday in April. Quietly, the way she did everything with grace, without fanfare, and with a plan already in place. The family met that Friday to discuss the building. I put that in quotes because there was nothing to discuss. Marcus walked in, sat at the head of the table, Ruth's chair, still warm in my memory, and announced he would be taking over all building operations. My parents agreed before he finished the sentence. No one looked at me, no one asked. Marcus said, "I will handle the business side. Naomi can keep doing whatever she does, collecting rent, fixing sinks." He waved his hand like he was brushing crumbs off a tablecloth. He reduced 17 years of my life with that building to fixing sinks. I sat there. I nodded. I said nothing. Because that is what I had been trained to do: absorb, accommodate, disappear. The Langford family had a system, and the system worked like this. Marcus was the future, and I was the maintenance. He was the keynote. I was the footnote. He was the investment. I was the overhead. And the worst part? I had accepted it. Not because I believed it was true, but because fighting it had never changed anything. So I stopped fighting and started working. Harder, quieter, more invisibly than ever. But 2 weeks after the funeral, I got a phone call that changed everything. Ruth's attorney, a woman named Deborah Pace, whom I would never met, asked me to come to her office in Fort Greene alone. She told me that 2 years before she died, Ruth had transferred full ownership of the building's LLC, Langford Properties, LLC, to me, sole member, sole owner. The paperwork had been filed with the state of New York, notarized, and stored in a safe deposit box at Brooklyn Federal Credit Union. Along with the documents, there was a handwritten letter, Ruth's handwriting, the same handwriting from those Saturday ledgers. It said, "This building isn't bricks, baby. It is people. And people need someone who sees them. That has always been you." I sat in Deborah Pace's office and cried for 20 minutes. Then I dried my face, took the key to the safe deposit box, and went back to work. I never told Marcus. I never told my parents. I kept managing the building the way I always had, invisibly, efficiently, without credit. And I watched. Because Grandma Ruth didn't just leave me a building, she left me a warning, and I was beginning to understand what it meant. Here is what you need to understand about what Marcus was doing behind the scenes. Within 6 months of Ruth's death, Marcus started modernizing the building's finances. He set up new accounts, hired contractors I had never heard of, and began rerouting maintenance funds through a company called Apex Property Solutions. On paper, it looked like standard property management. But I am a paralegal. I read contracts for a living, and something wasn't adding up. The maintenance budget was consistently short. Tenants were complaining about broken elevators, faulty heating, flickering hallway lights. I would submit repair requests. Marcus would say there was no budget. But the invoices showed payments going out thousands every month to Apex Property Solutions for work that was never done. I started keeping my own ledger, quietly, the same way Ruth taught me: names, dates, numbers. Over 3 years, I documented $347,000 in payments to Apex Property Solutions, a company with no business license, no employees, no physical address, just a P.O. box that happened to be shared with Apex Development Group, a real estate investment firm run by a man named Greg Holt. I found the emails. Marcus had been corresponding with Greg Holt for over 2 years. The plan was simple and brutal: drive out the current tenants through rent hikes and neglect, vacate the building, sell to Apex Development Group for a projected $4.2 million, and split the proceeds. Marcus would walk away with the lion's share. The tenants would walk away with nothing. The wire transfers confirmed it. Building maintenance account to Marcus's personal Chase account. 18 separate transfers. All documented, all time-stamped. All saved on a flash drive in my safe deposit box, right next to Ruth's letter. And the tenants. They had no idea what was coming for them. Mrs. Delgado, 72, had lived in apartment 4B for 14 years. She was raising her granddaughter, Sophia, on a seamstress's pension and Social Security. $8,100 a month would put her on the street before summer. She wouldn't even make it to the 60-day deadline. Her savings would run out trying to find a new place in a city that doesn't build apartments for 72-year-old grandmothers anymore. Darnell Williams, the same kid I used to see running through the hallways when Ruth took me on rounds, now had a wife named Keisha and 3 children under 6. They had just stabilized after COVID, just gotten back on their feet, just started sleeping through the night without worrying about eviction notices. And now here was Marcus, smiling in a gray suit, telling them the market had decided their home wasn't theirs anymore. 12 families, at minimum, had no backup plan and nowhere to go. Some had been there longer than Marcus had been alive. These weren't tenants to me. They were the people my grandmother trusted me to protect. I had the documents. I had the proof. I had the legal standing to end this with a single phone call to an attorney. But I kept waiting. For 3 years, I kept waiting. And I need to be honest about why. I was waiting for permission. From a family that had never once asked for mine. It was Derek who finally said it. Derek Chen, my partner. A public school teacher in Bushwick. The only person on this earth who knew about the LLC. We were sitting on our fire escape one night, and I was going over the numbers again. And he put his hand on the ledger and said, "You are not protecting them by staying quiet. You are protecting him." That sentence landed like a brick in still water. That night, I opened the safe deposit box for the first time in a year. I pulled out every document, the LLC certificate, the operating agreement, the ledger, the emails, the wire transfers. I spread them across our kitchen table, and I looked at them not as evidence I was collecting, but as evidence I was ready to use. I had 6 days before Marcus's rent notices became legally binding. 6 days to decide what kind of person I was going to be. The answer, it turned out, had been waiting for me since I was 9 years old. It was a Thursday afternoon, 2:15. I remember the time because I was in the middle of replacing a smoke detector on the 3rd floor when I heard the lobby door open and 2 sets of expensive shoes on the tile. Marcus walked in first. Gray suit, no tie, leather portfolio under his arm. Behind him was a man I had never seen in person, but whose name I would read in 100 emails. Greg Holt. Late 50s, silver hair, navy blazer. The kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. He looked around the lobby, the way a buyer looks at a house they have already mentally demolished. Marcus introduced him vaguely to the security camera, a consultant helping us modernize. He didn't know I reviewed the footage every week. They started on the 6th floor and worked their way down. I followed at a distance, 1 flight behind, close enough to hear. At each door, Marcus knocked, handed over a letter, and delivered the same rehearsed line. "We are adjusting to reflect current market conditions. You will find the details inside." Most tenants opened the letters right there. I could hear the confusion through the walls. "This has to be a mistake. We cannot afford this. Where are we supposed to go?" One woman on the 5th floor, Keisha Williams, Darnell's wife, opened the letter with her youngest on her hip and said, "Is this a joke?" Marcus said it wasn't. She closed the door without another word. I heard the deadbolt turn. Marcus never paused. He moved to the next door like a man checking boxes. Then they reached the 4th floor. Apartment 4B, Mrs. Delgado's door. She opened it in her housecoat, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She smiled when she saw Marcus. She had known him since he was a teenager. "Marcus, what a nice surprise." She always called him by his first name. He handed her the letter. She opened it slowly, the way she opens everything carefully, like it might be something precious. Her face changed. 8100. Me, Joe. I don't understand. I have always paid on time. I have never missed a month in 14 years. Marcus straightened his tie. "It is not personal, Mrs. Delgado. It is the market." Greg Holt, standing behind Marcus with his arms crossed, added, "Think of it as an opportunity to explore your options." Mrs. Delgado's hand started shaking. I could see it from the stairwell. Her granddaughter, Sophia, 16, honor roll, quiet as a church mouse, appeared in the hallway behind her and put a hand on her grandmother's shoulder. That is when Marcus noticed me. He didn't flinch. He didn't look guilty. He looked annoyed. The way you look at a speed bump on a smooth road. "Low rent was a favor, Naomi," he said, and favors don't last forever. Greg checked his watch. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't do any of the things Marcus expected me to do, because Marcus had spent his entire life underestimating my composure, the same way he had underestimated my competence. I walked past him, took Mrs. Delgado's hand, and said, "Don't sign anything. I will handle this." Then I turned to Marcus and spoke calmly. "You should be very careful about what you put in writing, Marcus." He laughed, the short, dismissive kind, the laugh of someone who has never once considered the possibility that he is wrong. "This is business, Naomi. You wouldn't understand." I paused. "Let the silence sit. I understand more than you think." "Then you understand these notices go out to every unit by Friday." "Friday," I said. "Got it." Greg leaned toward Marcus. "She is not going to be a problem, is she?" "And Marcus, my brother," my blood said. "She collects rent and fixes toilets. She is not a problem. Fixes toilets." There it was again. The same dismissal. Repackaged for a new audience. Fixing sinks at 26. Fixing toilets at 31. In Marcus's world, I would never be more than the person who cleaned up the messes he refused to see. And yet here's what I kept coming back to. Who does he think kept 42 units running for 5 years? Who answered the calls at 2 in the morning when a pipe burst on the 4th floor? Who sat with Mrs. Pock's husband in the lobby when the ambulance came? Who kept the books balanced? The inspections current? The insurance paid? Not Marcus. Marcus showed up for the presentation. I showed up for the work. They walked away, like men who believed they had already won. I stood in that hallway for a full minute after they left. Mrs. Delgado was still holding the letter. Sophia was holding her grandmother. And somewhere inside me, a door that had been locked for 5 years quietly clicked open. Marcus gave me until Friday. He didn't know I had been ready for 3 years. I need to take you back one more time. 6 months before Ruth died. We were sitting on the front stoop of the building. It was September, still warm, and the block smelled like someone was grilling on their fire escape. Ruth had a cup of tea in one hand, and my arm in the other. She said, "Your brother has your father's ambition, and none of my sense. One day, he is going to try to turn this place into something it was never meant to be." I asked her what I should do when that happened. She squeezed my arm and looked at me with eyes that had seen 60 years of Brooklyn change around her. "When the time comes, you will know, and you will have everything you need." Then she pressed a small key into my palm. A safe deposit box key. Brooklyn Federal Credit Union. She told me not to open it until I had to. I didn't open it for 2 years. When I finally did 6 months after her death, after Marcus had already started rerouting funds, I found the LLC transfer documents, the original deed to the building, the operating agreement with my name as sole member, and a note on lavender stationery, "Protect them." Baby girl Ruth knew. She saw it coming the way she saw everything quietly. From the stoop, watching the block change around her. She knew what Marcus would become, because she knew what my father had always been, a man who mistook ambition for character, and volume for vision. And she knew I was the only one in this family who understood that a building full of people is not a line item on a balance sheet. It is a covenant. It is a promise you make to 42 families, that their children will have a place to come home to, that their grandmothers will grow old in rooms they recognize, that their rent will not triple, because some man in a navy blazer decided their neighborhood was worth more without them in it. Here is the part that still amazes me. Marcus never checked. In 5 years, he never once looked at the LLC filing. Never reviewed the operating agreement. He assumed ownership had passed to him because he announced it had, and no one, not my parents, not the tenants, not even his own attorney, ever verified. Greg Holt's development contract, signed by Marcus Langford as managing member of Langford Properties, LLC. A title he invented, a role he never held. Every document he signed with Apex was built on authority he didn't have. I spent 3 years watching, documenting, waiting. Friday was my deadline too, but not for the reason Marcus thought. Thursday night, our kitchen table in Bushwick, Derek sat across from me with 2 mugs of coffee, and the expression of a man who knows something irreversible is about to happen. I spread everything out. The LLC certificate of formation, Naomi Langford, sole member, filed 5 years ago with the state of New York. The operating agreement, 14 pages. No mention of Marcus Langford anywhere. The ledger, 3 years of line items, showing $347,000 in payments to a shell company. Printouts of the email chain between Marcus and Greg Holt, including one from 11 months ago that read, "We need to accelerate the vacancy timeline. The old tenants are the only thing standing in the way." Wire transfer confirmations from the building's maintenance account to Marcus's personal Chase account, 18 transfers, all documented. And finally, Greg Holt's development contract, signed by Marcus as managing member of Langford Properties, LLC, fraudulent on its face. 6 documents, 5 years of patience, 1 decision left. Derek looked at the pile and said, "What are you going to do?" I had 2 options. I could hand everything to an attorney and let it play out behind closed doors, depositions, filings, settlements, clean and quiet. Or I could make sure Marcus and everyone watching understood exactly what he had done and exactly who had stopped him. "What would your grandmother do?" Derek asked. I almost smiled. She would do it in front of witnesses. The next morning, I called Carmen Reyes. Carmen was a housing rights attorney at the nonprofit where I worked part-time. She had spent 15 years fighting predatory landlords in Brooklyn, and she didn't scare easily. I laid everything out for her over the phone. The LLC transfer, the embezzlement, the shell company, the Apex contract. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "If those rent notices were issued by someone with no legal authority over the LLC, they are void, every single one. And if Marcus signed that Apex contract, representing himself as the owner, when he had no legal standing, that is fraud. Civil, and potentially criminal." "I know," I said. "What do you need from me?" "Be in the room when it happens." Here is where it gets precise. Marcus had scheduled a family meeting for Saturday morning at the building in the community room on the ground floor. He had invited my parents, Greg Holt, and Greg's associate. The purpose, as Marcus described it in our family group chat, was to finalize the transition plan and celebrate the next chapter for the Langford family. He even told me to come. His exact words, "You should be there, Naomi. You should see what real vision looks like." He wanted an audience. He was about to get one. The plan was simple. Let Marcus present. Let him lay out every detail of the deal. Let him commit to every number, every timeline, every lie on the record, in front of witnesses. Let him hand me the contract to sign as building manager, and then open the file. Friday, I prepped. I made copies of everything. Carmen reviewed each document and confirmed their legal standing. I called Mrs. Delgado and told her not to worry about the letter. "Just trust me," I said. She paused, then said, "Your grandmother told me the same thing once." I trusted her, and I trust you. Friday night. Derek and I sat on the fire escape again. The city was loud and warm below us. He said, "Are you scared?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. "No," I said. "I am tired. There is a difference. What if your parents never forgive you? They would have to see me first to forgive me." He went quiet. Then, "I see you." "I know," I said. "That is why I am still standing. I wasn't doing this for revenge. Revenge would have been calling Greg Holt anonymously and letting him discover the fraud on his own. Revenge would have been filing the AG complaint without warning and watching Marcus get arrested at brunch. I was doing this because 30 families got a letter this week telling them their home was a favor, and I was the only person in the world who could prove it wasn't. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting. I was ready. Saturday morning, 10 of the clock, the community room on the ground floor of the building, the same room where Grandma Ruth used to host Thanksgiving dinners for any tenant who had nowhere to go. Marcus had transformed it. A projector was set up on a folding table. A screen displayed the logo of Apex Development Group beside glossy architectural renderings of something called Langford Luxury Residences, a sleek glass and steel renovation that looked nothing like the building my grandmother had built. The current tenants weren't in those renderings. Neither were their children. Neither were their lives. Marcus stood at the front in a charcoal suit, looking like a man about to accept an award. Greg Holt sat to his left, portfolio open, pen in hand. Greg's associate, a younger man in a slim-fit suit, who never introduced himself, sat beside Greg with a laptop. My parents arrived at 10:05, Mom in a new blouse, Dad with his chest puffed out like he was attending his son's inauguration. They sat in the front row of folding chairs and didn't look at me when I walked in. Marcus looked up and smiled. "Glad you could make it, Naomi." Carmen Reyes was parked outside. I had texted her. "I will let you know when." Marcus began his presentation. He was polished. I will give him that. He walked the room through the vision: gut renovation, luxury rebrand, premium finishes, rooftop amenities, projected valuation of $4.2 million. He used words like market repositioning and value optimization and strategic asset reallocation. He sounded like a TED Talk written by a landlord. Then he got to the tenants. "Current residents," he said, "not tenants, not families, not people will be given relocation assistance of $1,500 each to help with their transition. $1,500 for families who had lived there 10, 12, 14 years. That wouldn't cover first and last month's rent anywhere in Brooklyn. It wouldn't cover a moving truck and a security deposit." It was an insult wrapped in a spreadsheet. My father nodded. "This is incredible, Marcus. Your grandmother would be proud." The room was quiet. I let the silence sit for 3 full seconds. Then I said, "Would she?" Marcus blinked. Greg looked at me. My father frowned. Marcus recovered with a laugh, the same dismissive laugh from the hallway. "Naomi, this isn't the time," he moved on. He slid a stack of contracts across the table, one for Greg, one for my parents to witness, and one for me. "Just need your signature here, Naomi. As building manager to confirm the tenant transition schedule." He needed my signature. He just didn't know why. I looked at the contract. I looked at Marcus. I looked at my parents. Sitting there like spectators at a show they had already decided to applaud. "Before I sign anything," I said, "I want to clarify something about the ownership of this building." I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila folder. I placed the first document on the table, the LLC certificate of formation, and slid it toward the center where everyone could see. "Langford Properties, LLC." I read aloud, "Sole member, Naomi Langford, filed 5 years ago. Notarized, recorded with the state of New York." The room didn't move. Marcus's smile didn't fall all at once. It dissolved slowly, like sugar in cold water. "What is this?" he said. "Grandma transferred full ownership of this building to me 2 years before she died. Legally, officially, permanently. I am the sole owner of this property, and every asset held by this LLC." Greg Holt picked up the document. His face changed the way a pilot's face changes when a warning light comes on. "Marcus," Greg said slowly. "You told me." Marcus cut him off. She is confused, Dad. Tell her this isn't." My father stared at the certificate. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. I texted Carmen. Now, 30 seconds later, Carmen Reyes walked through the community room door. She introduced herself calmly. "Carmen Reyes, housing rights attorney, representing Naomi Langford, sole owner of Langford Properties, LLC." Then I opened the rest of the file. I placed the ledger on the table, page by page. $347,000 in maintenance funds routed over 3 years to a company called Apex Property Solutions, which, Greg, has no business license and shares a P.O. box with your development group. I placed the wire transfer confirmations beside the ledger. 18 transfers from the building's maintenance account to Marcus's personal Chase account, all documented, all time-stamped. I placed the email printouts at the center. And this is an email from Marcus to you, Greg, dated 11 months ago, that reads, and I am quoting, "We need to accelerate the vacancy timeline. The old tenants are the only thing standing in the way." Greg Holt stood up. His face was the color of old cement. "I was told you had clear authority," he said to Marcus. His voice was flat and sharp at the same time. "If this LLC isn't yours, then every contract we signed is." Carmen finished his sentence. "Void, and potentially fraudulent. Mr. Holt, I would recommend you consult your own attorney. Quickly, Greg grabbed his portfolio. His associate closed the laptop and stood. They walked out of that room without a word. The door clicked shut behind them like a period at the end of a sentence. Marcus was still standing at the front of the room, but he wasn't presenting anymore. He was unraveling. Naomi, we can work this out. We are family. My mother spoke for the first time. Naomi, please. He didn't mean any harm. My father, let's all just calm down, and I stood. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. 3 days ago, Marcus handed a 72-year-old woman a letter telling her to leave her home of 14 years. When I asked him to stop, he told me in front of a complete stranger that low rent was a favor. And Dad, you told me to let him handle it, the way successful people do. I looked at my brother, my parents, the projector still glowing with Marcus's glossy renderings of a future that would never exist. Consider it handled. I collected every document from the table. Every page. The rent notices are void. I will be sending corrections to every tenant today. And Marcus, you can leave the building now. You don't have authority here. You never did. He didn't move at first. Then he found his voice. You are going to regret this. I picked up my bag. No, I said. I really don't think I will. I walked out. Carmen followed. The door closed behind us, and for the first time in my life, I left my family sitting in silence, and I didn't feel guilty about it. By Saturday afternoon, Carmen and I had drafted corrected letters to all 42 units. Rent unchanged. Leases secure. Signed by me, the actual owner, with Carmen's firm listed as legal counsel. I slid them under every door myself, the way Ruth used to deliver holiday cards. Mrs. Delgado opened her door before I finished walking away. She was holding the original eviction letter in one hand and my corrected letter in the other. She looked at me, looked at both letters, and said, I knew it. I knew you wouldn't let it happen. Then she pulled me into a hug that smelled like lavender and adobo, and I nearly lost the composure I had been holding all day. That afternoon, I changed every password on the building's management accounts. I revoked Marcus's access to the bank accounts, the maintenance portal, the security system, the tenant database. I removed his name from every vendor contact list. By 5 o'clock, Marcus Langford had the same level of access to that building as any stranger walking past on Flatbush Avenue. Monday morning, Carmen filed a formal complaint with the New York State Attorney General's office regarding the embezzlement of $347,000 in building maintenance funds through a fraudulent shell company. She also filed a cease and desist letter to Apex Development Group, notifying them that all contracts signed by Marcus Langford were executed without legal authority and were therefore null and void. Marcus called 14 times Saturday night. I didn't answer. He left 6 voicemails, each one a different version of the same script: confusion, then anger, then bargaining, then something that almost sounded like fear. The first message was indignant. You have no right to do this. This building is a family asset. The fourth was strategic. Let's sit down. Just the two of us. I am sure we can find an arrangement. The sixth was raw. Naomi, please. Just call me back. I need to understand what is happening. What was happening was consequences, and Marcus had never met those before. My mother texted me Sunday morning. One message. You have torn this family apart. I read it twice. Then I set the phone down and said to no one, to the ceiling, to my grandmother number. I just stopped holding it together. My father called Sunday afternoon. His voice was careful, measured, the voice of a man choosing his words for the first time in his life. Can we sit down and talk about this like adults? I said, adults don't steal $347,000 and blame the person who caught them. He didn't call back. That evening, I sent one message to our family group chat. I wrote it 3 times before I was satisfied. I love this family. But I will not protect anyone from the consequences of what they have done. The building stays as Grandma built it, a home for people who need one. If you want to be part of that, you know where I am. If you want to argue about it, call your lawyer. Then I added one more line. This isn't about revenge. Revenge would have been letting Greg Holt find out about the fraud on his own. This is about keeping a promise to someone who believed in me when no one else did. I put the phone on the charger. Derek made pasta. We ate dinner in our kitchen, while the city hummed outside. And for the first time in 3 years, I didn't have a secret sitting on my chest like a stone. The first 2 weeks were the loudest. Marcus's deal with Apex collapsed immediately. Greg Holt didn't just walk away, he turned around swinging. His attorneys sent Marcus a formal demand letter within 72 hours, alleging misrepresentation, breach of contract, and fraud. Greg had invested time, legal fees, and due diligence costs based on Marcus's claim of ownership. Now he wanted every dollar back plus damages. Marcus hired his own attorney, an expensive one, from what I heard. The kind of attorney you hire when you know you are in trouble but haven't yet accepted how deep. Within a month, Marcus had drained most of his savings on retainer fees alone. My parents' house went quiet, in a way it had never been before. Dad stopped calling. Mom stopped texting. The family group chat, the one where Marcus had once announced his vision, and my parents had responded with applause emojis, went silent. It stayed silent for 6 weeks. I imagine there were conversations happening in that house that I will never be a part of. I imagine my father sitting at his kitchen table, rereading the LLC documents I had left copies of, trying to reconcile the son he had championed with the evidence in front of him. I imagine my mother staring at her phone, drafting messages she never sent. I don't know what those weeks looked like for them. I only know what they looked like for me, quiet, and strangely ordinary, and free. Word got around the building faster than I expected. Tenants talk. Mrs. Delgado talked. By the end of the first week, I couldn't walk through the lobby without someone stopping me. Mr. Okafor brought me plantains. Mrs. Pak left a jar of kimchi at my office door. Darnell's wife Keisha found me in the hallway and said, "My kids sleep in that apartment. You saved their home." I didn't know what to say to that. I still don't. Mrs. Delgado showed up at my apartment one evening with a foil tray of homemade empanadas, and her granddaughter Sophia beside her. She took both my hands and said, "Your grandmother is smiling, Mija. I promise you she is." The medium term was quieter but heavier. 2 months in, the New York State Attorney General's office opened a formal investigation into Marcus Langford and Apex Property Solutions. The shell company was confirmed no license, no employees, no legitimate operations. Financial records were subpoenaed. Marcus's real estate license was placed under review by the State Licensing Board. The investigation expanded beyond our building. It turned out Apex Development Group had similar arrangements in at least 3 other properties in Brooklyn predatory vacancy schemes, targeting rent-stabilized buildings. Our case became the thread that started unraveling the whole operation. Greg Holt's name appeared in the AG's public filings. His other projects were put on hold pending review. Extended family started reaching out. Aunt Patricia, Ruth's daughter-in-law, who I hadn't spoken to in years, called me on a Wednesday evening. "Ruth always said you were the one," she told me. "I should have said something sooner. I should have backed you up." I told her it meant more than she knew. At a community board meeting in month 3, the board chair recognized me for his word's exceptional commitment to tenant protection in the face of predatory development practices. There was applause. I didn't give a speech. I just nodded. Ruth would have done the same. I used the recovered funds to implement a $200 monthly rent reduction for long-term tenants, families who had been there 5 years or more. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a message. This building rewards loyalty, not punishes it. When I posted the notice in the lobby, 3 tenants came downstairs within the hour to ask if it was real. It is real, I told each of them, and it is permanent. The building got repairs, real ones. A new boiler, the old one had been unfixable according to Marcus for 2 winters, which meant 2 winters of space heaters, and inflated electric bills for every tenant above the 3rd floor. Hallway lighting on every floor, LED panels that actually worked, replacing the flickering fluorescence that had been half dead since before COVID. Elevator maintenance that was 3 years overdue. Fresh paint in the stairwells. A new intercom system. Things Marcus had said there was no budget for, paid for with money that had been in the budget all along. It had just been redirected to Marcus's Chase account and Greg Holt's phantom invoices. The reconciliation attempts came in waves. Month 2. My father showed up at the building on a Tuesday afternoon. I saw him on the security camera standing in the lobby, looking at the mailboxes, reading the tenant names, the way you read names on a memorial. He stood there for 10 minutes. Then he left without buzzing my office. I watched the whole thing on the monitor and felt something I didn't expect. Not anger, not satisfaction, just a deep, tired sadness. Month 3. My mother sent a card in the mail. No return address, but I recognized her handwriting. Inside, it said 5 words. I am sorry, I didn't see it. No excuses. No, but, no, justification. Just 5 words. I didn't respond immediately. I needed to sit with it. I needed to figure out if the silence between us felt like absence, or like peace. I sat on the rooftop that evening, the same rooftop where I am sitting now, and held the card against my chest, and asked myself an honest question. Do I miss them? Or do I miss the idea of them? The version of my parents, I always wanted the ones who would have come to my scholarship dinner, who would have asked my opinion at that table after Ruth died, who would have looked at me the way they looked at Marcus. I missed those parents. But those parents had never existed. The ones who did exist had sent me a 5-word apology after 31 years of looking the other way, and somehow, those 5 words meant more than any of the praise they had ever given Marcus, because they were the first honest thing my mother had ever said to me. I wasn't ready to respond, but I kept the card. Marcus made no direct contact. Through his attorney, he requested a conversation with Miss Langford to discuss family matters. Carmen declined on my behalf. There was nothing to discuss that wouldn't be discussed in a courtroom or a mediator's office. There was one development I didn't expect. My cousin Vanessa, the youngest Langford, 22, just out of college, sent me a message on a Saturday morning. I heard what happened. I heard all of it. I want to help with the building. I want to learn what Grandma Ruth was trying to do. Will you teach me? I said yes. She started coming by on weekends. I gave her a copy of Ruth's leather notebook, blank pages. Same brand, and told her to start with the names. And then, one night, while reorganizing the safe deposit box, I found something I had missed. Tucked behind the original deed, stuck to the back of a manila envelope, was a second note from Ruth. Same lavender stationery, same handwriting. It said, "Don't be angry at your brother. Be angry at the silence that let him believe he was the only one who mattered. Then break it." I read it 3 times. Then I took it home and put it on the refrigerator, next to a photo of Derek and me and a drawing Sofia Delgado had given me of the building crayons on construction paper, every window filled with a different color. 2 weeks after the meeting, Marcus's bank account was frozen pending the ag investigation. 3 months later, I replaced the boiler my brother said we couldn't afford. 6 months later, Mrs. Delgado's granddaughter Sofia graduated from high school. She invited me. I sat in the 3rd row and clapped until my hands hurt. A local news outlet picked up the story briefly. Brooklyn woman saves 30 families from predatory eviction scheme. They asked for an interview. I declined. This story was never about publicity. It was about a promise I made to a woman who trusted me before anyone else did. Today, I am sitting on the rooftop of the building. It is early morning. Brooklyn is waking up below me. Delivery trucks, school buses, the Ford train rattling over the bridge in the distance. I have a cup of coffee in one hand, and my grandmother's leather notebook in the other. The same notebook she gave me when I was 9 years old. The pages are full now. 22 years of names, apartment numbers, birthdays, notes. The newer pages have different handwriting. Vanessa's careful and eager, learning the rhythm of it. The building looks the same from the outside. Brown brick fire escapes. The same front stoop where Ruth and I used to sit in September. But inside, everything is different. The hallways are lit, the elevator works, the boiler doesn't rattle at 3 in the morning, and the tenants really know that someone is watching out for them. Including me. Here is what I have learned. And I want to be honest about it. Because this isn't a fairy tale, and I am not pretending it is. About family. Family isn't a title, it is a pattern. And patterns can be broken, but only if someone is willing to be the one who breaks them. I broke a pattern that had been running in my family for decades, the pattern of silence. Of looking the other way, of giving power to the person who demanded it loudest, instead of the person who earned it quietest. Breaking it cost me something. I will not pretend it didn't. But what it gave me back was worth more than what I lost. About self-worth, I spent 26 years believing that being useful was the same as being loved. It is not. Being useful kept me invisible. Being honest made me real. There is a difference between serving people because you love them and serving people because you think that is the only way they will keep you around. I don't confuse those anymore. About boundaries, protecting what is right sometimes means standing against the people who raised you. That doesn't make you ungrateful. It doesn't make you selfish. It doesn't make you the one who tore the family apart. It makes you the one who finally told the truth in a room full of people who had agreed to keep lying. My mother said I tore the family apart, but the family was never together, not really. It was held in place by my silence, my compliance, and my labor. When I stopped providing those things, the structure didn't collapse. It just became visible for what it always was. A hierarchy built on convenience, not love. If you are watching this and you have ever been the one who kept things running, while someone else got the credit, the one who fixed the sinks, and collected the rent, and answered the emergency calls at 2 in the morning, while somebody else stood at the front of the room and called it vision, I want you to know something. Your quiet work was never invisible. It was foundational. And the people who dismissed it, they were standing on it the whole time. You don't have to burn the house down to prove you built it. You just have to stop letting someone else put their name on the door. Thank you for staying with me through this story. It is the hardest thing I have ever told, and the most important. If you have ever had to protect something or someone from the people who were supposed to be on your side, I would love to hear about it. Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe if you want more stories like this, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Take care of your people, and don't forget, you are one of them. Until next time.